The 1990s saw the near death of literature in Nigeria. It was just near death. But then by the 2000s and middle of 2000, there was a newness, a new life that came to literature and writing and all of that in Nigeria. And it was helped actually by companies like Farafina and Cassava Republic. One of the writers that came on the show during that period was Sefi Atta. Had spent a number of years by then just deliberately wanting to encourage the nation to read and to meet these new great writers, these new minds who were publishing books and stories about Nigeria, about Africa, about everything. So there was this one time in 2005 when the women and I sat down to talk with Sefi Atta about her book, Everything Good Will Come. It was interesting that Kaine Agari was amongst the women on that panel because she later on went on to publish her book, which we were ribbing her about on that show. She later on went on to publish it to much critical and commercial success. So here it is, Sefi Atta, 2005, New Dawn.
Atta is written this absolutely gorgeous book, Everything Good Will Come. But before then, Sefi was an accountant, trained accountant. Then she decided she was going to take a master's degree in creative writing and began to write. She's written many short stories and won prizes from Zoetrope and Red Hen Press, and she's appeared in the Pose Review. It's long. It's on the internet. She's here. Good morning.
Good morning for me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And you make my life sound more exciting than it really is.
I have this thing, when I see people who are really, talented, I'm starstruck.
Thank you. I'm humbled. Thank you.
But jokes apart, I have read the book.
Yes.
And the book spoke to me. It was a Nigerian story. All you could see the streets, you could see the people, you could feel their pain, you could be angry at the things they were doing, and it was written with such wit and creativity. I love it.
Thank you, Funmi.
All right, I'll stop. Who's going first?
Let me start by congratulating her.
Right.
It's a wonderful book, very beautiful language. If you have appreciation for language, you like the book. So I have to congratulate you.
Thank you, Alaja.
All right, so let's stop the mutual admiration. So let's stop the group admiration. And ask talk about the stuff in the book.
I've not read the book. But what I've always wanted to know is, because we see a lot of books from writers outside Nigeria, but not that many from authors resident in Nigeria. What is it about living abroad that focuses your mind so much into
that
writing?
Makes that you actually get to the point of writing?
Because I'm reading and all these things, and I know that. Why haven't I written about that?
I don't know about that. I think a lot of Nigerian-based writers are telling their stories, writing them as I am. Perhaps there are more opportunities to be published overseas, and that's what you're seeing. It's good to have distance, I think, physical and time-wise when you're telling a story. And so perhaps it helps that I'm based overseas. But I don't know about that. I can't speak for other people.
Right. Nosh?
I'm curious about the title. Everything good will come. It sounds almost like motivational book or Christian, an extension of a Christian book. What's the idea for the title?
Well, it came down to my editor deciding that for me. And you're absolutely right. A few people have said to me, it sounds like an inspirational book. And it's funny because you stumbled over the name, and I often do. I wish I could abbreviate it to everything, but I can't. So far, I haven't come up with a better title. I have to say, it's not my title. I didn't.
But does it contradict the story of the book?
It's funny. Some people have said that perhaps it does. It's not. It's a complicated story and has many negative aspects. So then, why such a positive title? And I always explain the whole. That my editor made a decision. But I think also you can look at it in an ironic way. You open it expecting everything good to come, and then you see this whole story coming to which contradicts the title.
Yes, it's like life.
Yes, exactly.
Kaine?
Sorry, she's a budding author. She doesn't want us to mention it, but she has a manuscript. You know, we're trying to make her. So, here's your chance.
Do you have a title for your manuscript?
I had one, and then yesterday I came up with another one. And I'm sure.
The editor is going to change it.
Yes, exactly. But there's several things. Like you, I don't. Well, not you have a master's in creative writing, but I studied other things and never really thought I could write or didn't even like writing until like 5 years ago. So how, when did you start writing and what were some of the things that kept you writing even though you went into a profession that I think is just, totally unrelated to writing?
In some ways, accounting, well, it's not related, absolutely in no way at all, but it prepares you because it's such a dry profession, and for me at least, my mind was always wandering when I was checking figures or whatever. And also the discipline of asking people questions and getting the correct responses for them is useful when you're a writer. I'm sure you feel that way as a journalist.
Yes.
So there are certain things that you can take from accounting, whether or not people believe that. Very much like you, I didn't think that I could be a writer. Never dreamt of it. Even when I was writing, I didn't think it could be a viable profession. And I think that comes down to putting a face to the profession. So if you'd seen many Nigerian women who are writing, you probably think, oh yes, that's something I could do. I didn't have that. We had Buche Mecheta, Zulu Shofola, and I hope I'm not missing anyone important. Flora Wakpa, Mabel Shegun. And still, I didn't think it was enough to constitute, a community of writers that I could say, yeah, I could join them, I could be part of them. All by accident. I was working as an accountant and in New York, and I went to see my boss. I came across a brochure for New York University, and they had this course advertised. And I took the course. I just had a baby. I was in my early 30s then, a long time ago.
I'm not going to say anything about
And, having a baby, studying for my professional exams in the United States, I suppose my energy level was so high that when that was over, I felt I needed another challenge, as if work wasn't bad enough. And I took the course. After the course, I remember thinking that this is what I want to do. And still, I did not think it was a real profession. It was almost like playing. I enjoyed it too much, So.
All right. This book has so much in it. It's centered around the story of Anita.
Yes.
And Anita is a Nigerian woman, particularly of our own generation. I can connect with her. I mean, the stories, the times we're talking about, the 70s, the 80s, even the early 90s. And her friend Sherry, whom I loved. I mean, I just loved Sherry because she's a typical Nigerian woman in some respects. Now, there's violence in the book, both personal violence, disappointment, pain, national anguish. I mean, there's so much. You put a lot of stuff into this book. I mean, at a point I'm thinking, concentrate on the story. And the other time I'm thinking, yes, it is true. Social commentary. How did you weave all of that together? And was there a need? Did you feel a need? It was like expunging yourself,
Exactly.
wasn't it?
You've said it. And it's a first book thing. It's funny when you're given the opportunity to speak, to express yourself, you say everything. And it may not be the best thing for a book. It may not be the best thing for art. That's up to the critics to decide. Mm-hmm. And you're right, I was concerned that people might be distracted by the story of Nigeria, the social and political story of Nigeria. The challenge was to always bring Eniton's story to the forefront. Mm-hmm. And I hope I succeeded. That's about where I live. But it's true, you're right. This narrator was ranting, and I was ranting vicariously through her.
I really liked that because it showed Lagos for all the many colors that are in Lagos. It shows, there's some part that, there's some guy of Brazilian descent, and there are these dimensions to Lagos that you don't really think about, but they're here, in Lagos. And so it showed you know, a strong woman's voice. It showed different things, and there's a point when Eniton says, you know, she had a baby, she could do anything, which reminded me of my friend's sister, who after she had her first child, she talked to anybody, you know, and she was like, I've just had a child. I can say, you know, I can say this, I can do this. And we're like, oh, Joanna, you have to be a little more respectful. And she's like, no, I've just had a child. You know, so it really, you know, there were all these connections with the characters, people I know, you know, or have heard about. And I really enjoyed that ranting, as you say.
What I want to know is, because a lot of authors like to distance themselves from their book. You know, you ask them, is there any character in the book that resembles you or resembles someone you know? They say, no, 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 no. I mean, I'm just writing, you know. So is there anybody in the book that resembles
Doesn't
you
Eniton have some
or
elements?
resembles people you know?
No, I mean, Eniton is tall and slim.
I always say no, because I think that people think you haven't earned your right as a writer unless you've created something from scratch. You know, they think, oh, maybe you're not writing fiction, you're writing about yourself, and anyone can do that. I think in all my characters there's a part of me, even in the male characters. And it's funny that people don't even ask me about the male characters. Even the character like Mike Obi, who knows, there might be a part of me in him that wants to be the player, you know, to have... But no one ever goes into that. They focus on Eniton. I think you have to like... There has to be a relationship between yourself and the main character, protagonist, they call them. It doesn't necessarily have to be a smooth one. There were times that I felt that perhaps she shouldn't have said what she said or been so judgmental, you know. As a writer, at least for me, when I'm writing, I try to make myself as fluid as possible, which means that, you know, I suspend my judgment on people so I can get to know them better. The characters, I call them people because they're so real to me. Eniton wasn't like that. She was someone who had strong opinions. And sometimes I wish she wouldn't express them. But she did, you know. There's part of me in her, but we're not exactly totally alike. I think she's better looking than I am.
Eniton eventually stepped into our own, because I mean there was a point where I'm thinking, you girl are just a bloody coward, you're just talking, I think you do something, but she eventually stepped into her own. Yeah. Something that I found very poignant in this book is the description of a rape.
Yes.
Had never seen it described with such, what is the word?
Vivid.
No, it wasn't described. It was, you felt it, but it honored the people concerned. You understand? It honored the people concerned. It didn't destroy the people. Although you could see that this was a destructive act, but you know, you saw it, but you were away from it. I mean, I'd never seen it described in such a way, and it's always such a technical, very tricky place.
Very much
line
so.
to walk, even in films.
It is.
It's very a thin line to. How did you manage to write that particular bit in such a way?
You know, it's incredible that you mentioned the word technical, because that's all it is, you know. And at the same time, you want the essence to come out. You want something more than the technical aspects of the scene to come out. It was a hard scene to write, you know, and I still don't know if I succeeded. But I remember that while I was in New York, before I started with my MFA, way before I started, I was with a group of writers, a workshop for writing women like myself who were also working at the same time. And one of them had written a rape scene. I never thought I could write one. And I remember the workshop teacher had said to her, you're not specific. You need to get specific when you're writing a scene like this. You need to mention blood, saliva, all those words, you know, have to be said, and also make the reader squirm. I wasn't sure, you know, because I thought, do you need to be gratuitous? Shouldn't you draw back? And then I was thinking about Nigerian readers as well, how they would respond. In the end, I just did what my instincts told me to do, and that's how I wrote the scene.
I think you did it very, successful. It will work in Nigeria and anywhere. It was done. It was done. It's like the difference between being naked and being nude. That's what you succeeded.
Thank
between
you.
between sensual and sexual. You managed to walk that line. Now I'm looking like this because I've read the book.
No,
And I cheated with other women. They got their books late.
No, because it's, when you talk sexual and sensual, I say, yes, Funmi. Don't worry.
Well, I would just like to, on a lighter note now, the character Sherry. Just, maybe if you're doing a sequel or something, or the next edition, maybe you just write Sherifa. Because that happens to be my name. I don't get to call Sherry. It's Sherifa.
Would you love to play Sherry in the film?
No. I don't think I'm a good actress. Maybe Sherifa will do better.
What does Sherifa mean?
The noble one.
Oh, really? That's wonderful.
Oh, wow. Because I
So I don't know what character she played here.
Oh, when you get to
she's
that
noble.
In my opinion,
I think she's noble.
I think the name works. I think she's noble. The other things I also like about the book, and I don't want to go into specifics because I also don't want to stereotype the book. I don't want it to look like, it's a woman's book or it's a book about Nigeria. No, you've got to read it and experience it. But there are little things like this. Everything good will come. There's a particular phrase that was used over and over in the book. Nothing good will come of you. And we always thought, what does that mean? What does that mean? One of the girls already just hit on it one day. It's a common Nigerian Yoruba phrase.
Parents always say.
What do you think it is?
No, you never amount to anything.
How do you say it in Yoruba? It's a common thing. They say it on the streets every day. Koni dafun. That's what it means. It means koni dafun. And they always say it, in abuse. So constantly, conductors will say, somebody's cussing someone, say nothing good will come of you. And I think that's really is why this title is like that.
Yes.
Because eventually everything good will come.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oma dafun.
Yes.
Oma actually dafun. Well,
Actually,
that's what I think.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Presenter's liberty here.
So what's the plan for the second book? We always ask about the second book because we think that you must be working on something.
I am always working on something. There's no sequel, unfortunately. It's so sad when a story ends. That's it, And but they still live. The characters are still going about doing their thing. And my second novel is totally different. It's not set in it's set in Lagos, but it's not set in that part of Lagos. It's a very urban story, and also set in provincial Nigeria. A hometown. I have two narrators in this story, mother and a daughter. And it's really about, it was set in the 1980s, a young Nigerian woman who gets drawn into the drug trafficking trade. But it's also a story about family secrets and mothers and daughters, how mothers and daughters repeat the same mistakes because they fail to communicate with each other. So it has all those elements. It's funny, with all my stories, it's difficult to say what they're about, because I always like to have dimensions, Okay. So it's not just about the drug trade. It's about mothers and daughters. And it's also about this dilemma of marriage with young Nigerian women, I don't know if you've all noticed, but there just seem to be more women than men in Nigeria. And it's a social problem, a lot of women worrying about when and how they will get married, simply because, as you said, our graduation days are when we have the first child, and then we graduate to womanhood, right? So that pressure.
And then because it seems that there are more, apparently it looks like there are more women than men, the men also feel, a man was telling me about it yesterday, that they are being kind to the women.
That's what they say.
So there's pressure. So when you eventually marry, you also have to worry about the fact that your husband is spreading the joy. So there are all kinds of,
Your husband is being
Let me ask Sefi now. As a writer, there's sometimes you feel like, so stressed. From my own experience, why am I doing this? You get so tired that you don't want to continue again. Do you often get that feeling?
I do.
And how do you
deal with it?
Yeah, how do you deal with that?
I do. There are moments that I get frustrated. Never with my writing. I never get frustrated. I can't write enough. I have so many stories to tell. It's the time that's a factor for me. I get frustrated with the publishing industry. Overseas.
Even abroad?
Overseas, not here. I've had the most wonderful experience here with Farfina and Mukhtar Bakari, who has been such a joy to work with. Always respectful, of creative people, and working with him is almost like swimming in warm water, you know, there's no problem there. But it's been difficult abroad, you know, and I do get frustrated. And what I do is I have meltdowns. I don't know if all of you share that, you know, and my family just basically, they're there for me. My husband, Boyga Ransom Kuti, and my daughter, Temi, you know, they'll just, mommy, either get over it or they'll listen to my whining. And I do. I pick myself up. Every woman has problems, you know, not just writers.
Talking about being outside of the country, publishing there, you find, I mean, we are enthusiastic, for example, about this because we can connect with it. I often wondered if writers are not sometimes pigeonholed into writing what is acceptable in the Western part of the world.
Yes.
As such, if you write as honestly and candidly as you've written here, you might not be, you know, celebrated, you know, and awarded and perhaps rewarded. In that, I mean, if there was a thriving film industry, I would be pushing to make a film of this already.
Oh,
you know, so
thank you.
There's a thriving film industry.
I forgot to be there. I'm so sorry.
And they
Nollywood for
Nollywood for, and they've probably written my story already in Nollywood.
Maybe not.
You know,
Well, it's about if you can do the film and represent all the dimensions, but sometimes our stories are just like
one
in
dimension.
oh,
the
really?
beginning of the film, you might know what's going to happen. Chances, you just know how it's going to turn out.
Well, if you're involved with Nollywood, hook me up, please. I don't mind.
So really, that's what we need to do now. Yeah, go on. How do you deal with all of that? You know what I mean? Right.
A lot of people talk about that, but you know, I live on hope, as most Nigerians do, that finally people will want to see us write our stories in ways that matter to us rather than ways that matter to them. And you're absolutely right. When I was writing this story, I kept thinking, you know, would they appreciate it? Would they believe it? They're so used to seeing a certain type of story, and
no spirits, no ghosts, no jumping in the forest.
it's funny you mentioned the spirits. I've never seen a spirit, and they keep popping up in stories. And to me, there are more interesting things to talk about within Nigeria that we can actually see and we experience. But they have this fixation with spirits. And not that I have anything against spirit stories, but you know, Ben Okri did that and did that brilliantly. But for me, my imagination doesn't stretch that far. It's always about what I can see. You know, right now I'm sitting with these wonderful women and I'm thinking, you know, what is their story? That's what interests me, you know, rather than...
All right, there's an...
Sorry, how long did it take you to finish or to write the story?
You know, and someone's going to catch me out on this because I've given so many different dates. And the reason why is that I can't remember. You know I finished my first draft in 3 months. Then I was rewriting the story, you know, as I grew as a person, as a writer. You know, I started writing the novel. I was much younger than Enito. I thought she was very brave. By the time I finished writing it, I was in my 40s and I thought, like, you, pick yourself up. Why you know? But then I was doing other things as well. From start to finish, I think it took me about 7 years from the day I first picked up a pen and thought I'll write this story to the day it came out on the shelf. And that's, I don't know how long I spent writing it.
All right, kindly write your book, okay?
No, that means that
Finish your book. Finish your book. Okay? Finish your
you can
book.
rewrite
The
that.
last question. The last question. I know you've been having the reading sessions, you know, abroad. When you write a book, if you write a book, you go on reading and signing sessions, but it's not very common here.
Farafina is here.
Farafina has arrived.
Going around doing the reading sessions.
Yes.
What has been your experience
So far?
Yeah, so far.
Well, it's funny, we were in Abuja yesterday and a thunderstorm happened to us. So that was very interesting. And I also had a Michael Jackson impersonator come. So there were all sorts of things going on. And I don't think it's different from a book tour anywhere else in the world. Yeah, it's the same thing. You just have to be on the ball the whole time. Things happen. Farafina is doing their best for me. So I can't even get into that,
All right.
you know.
Well, Sefi,
I'm happy.
the thing is that, you know, I heard he's talking about women and all that. There's one woman here who's the boss, and she's saying it's enough.
Okay.
Finally, you are married to a Ransom Kuti.
I am.
The Ransom Kutis are related to Wale Soyinka.
Yes, they are.
What is this literary thing about the Ransom Kuti and the Soyinka
I
and
don't
their
know.
spouses and all
I don't know.
that?
You'll have to ask them.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Good fortune to you.